Hey everybody, and welcome to Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from the Straight. We've got a special guest with us today, Will Johnson, a Bloodstock agent to the Stars and member of the FBAA, will be joining us in a minute. We'll also discuss the current issue in Victoria surrounding jockeys riding in jump outs, and finally we'll round off on the implications of the delay in advertising reform by the federal government, an issue that sort of bubbled along throughout the year. But let's get straight into having a chat to Will. That's part of our bit of a chat we've had with the Federation of Bloodstock Agents Australia. We've decided to have every couple of weeks having a guest from FBAA on board to discuss all things Bloodstock and where we're at the moment. And Will, thanks for joining us, and good to have you on board.
Yeah, hi, Bren and Tim. Thank you for having me. And thanks for pointing out that I'm a member of the FBAA. And we're working towards building that branding over the coming months into the yearling sales.
Um,
And
I
we'll
probably,
just
I was going
before
to say I
we
probably should introduce Tim to start with. Tim, thanks for joining us, mate. That's right. I didn't throw you to start with, but plenty to talk about in the bloodstock space at the moment. Tim, it's an anticipated time of year, isn't it? We're sort of hitting that sort of almost the start of December now. We're only a month and a bit away from the start of Magic Millions, and there's plenty to talk about, isn't there?
absolutely, Bren, and interesting timing. Will's joining us from the Warwick Farm unpaid jump outs. We'll talk about that later, but let's stick to what Will knows best: bloodstock issues. And Will catalogues have been being released thick and fast in the last few weeks. Magic Millions, New Zealand Bloodstock this week. Even one of Bren and my favourite sales, the Tassie catalogue, got released this week as well. There's plenty on the table for you.
Yeah, there's no shortage of reading, that's for sure. It looks like the catalogs that have been released so far. Great excitement, particularly with first season size like Home Affairs and Stay Inside to be well represented, and looking forward to seeing horses in the flesh over the coming weeks up in the Hunter Valley.
How does
How much pre-catalog work do you do? Well, how much
Yeah,
before
very,
the catalogs come out? How much work have you done already? How much legwork have you done already?
yeah. So as soon as the Magic Millions catalog came out, had a good flick through there. Uh, as you know, until you see the horses, it probably doesn't do the research just, because you can do a lot of put in a lot of time and effort, and then the horse presents itself, and you may not like the physical. So I normally spend more time looking at the physicals and then do the research before the sale. So working backwards rather than doing a short list exclusively from the catalogs. I'll base it more on type. So try and see every horse in every sale in 2025.
And Will, famously, Gay Waterhouse probably pioneered the inspection process. She's already this year again already probably been out and about for 6 weeks, going on farms and looking at these yearlings that are very early in their yearling preparation. Is it something that you like to incorporate into your inspection process going on farm?
Yeah, especially the bigger drafts, when some farms have upwards of 35 yearlings to look at, and if you see them at the farm, you can probably slim your shortlist down to what you're going to review. It's very hard to look at 1,000 horses on complex, so if you can shorten that down to, let's say, 600, 700, having looked at 400 or 500 in the Hunter Valley, it makes that week on the Gold Coast leading up to the sale much more efficient time wise.
Yeah, I was going to say, when working through that and just working through that list, obviously talk about you have a short list sort of going into the sale, or shortish list, I suppose, like probably a long list, probably. But yeah, how do you work through that during the week then, or the week and a half leading up to the sale, Will? Is it just a matter of sort of culling bit by bit about where you're at and going through what you need to do? Like obviously you start out with a big sweep, you go through for second, third inspections and work through like that?
Yeah, so this year I was buying for Annabelle and Rob, Annabelle Nation, Rob Archibald, and it also gets down to who you're buying for, what they like. So you're able to sit down as a team and compare notes and refine that holistically as a team, and then say specifically someone may want a filly with a residual value to breed from. So that'd be a different list in itself. So there's obviously pin hookers that are looking to breeze up horses, and they're only going to be looking at colts by certain stallions that are fashionable in Hong Kong. So you can start building different types of lists early, and then speak to the clientele about those short lists.
How important is it if you see a horse, in the next few weeks in the Hunter Valley and then seeing how they've developed and changed by the time they get to the Gold Coast, often it's hot and it's taxing on yearlings. Do you take that into account?
Yeah, a horse's temperament's obviously very important to how it's going to be trained and hopefully hold up to the pressures of racing. So if there's any sign of a poor temperament through that process, it does make it more difficult to want to buy a horse. Um, there are obviously examples of horses with poor attitudes. Let's say a Monsieur back in the day was very well handled, yeah, highly strung horse, and that was passed through stock. So you're always mindful of different sire lines have different character traits, but you do want to try and find a horse with an excellent attitude, both on the farm and at the sales complex, and the physical that's improving all the time, putting on condition rather than losing it, and walking out as well the first time as they are at the end of the day.
Obviously, it's not just yearlings this time of year. Will you're thinking about? Obviously, we've just seen the sales in Kentucky and Keeneland in the last sort of few weeks. It's Tattersalls and Arcana's turn in England and France. I mean, how do you guys balance this out? Obviously, you're doing a bit of travel. If you're looking at mares, if you're looking at other prospects that are coming through, how do you balance out your energy and your time between travel and international deals? I know you do a lot of work business internationally as well, and sort of being on top of what's going on from coming forward for the yearling season.
Yeah, it's probably I read the TDN every day, which covers Europe and America, so it's easy to keep on top of results and then shortlist fillies by different size that are getting black type to follow. Probably work hard on a network of people in different countries that sort of understand the types of physicals and pedigrees that I'd be looking for, and with knowledge of the clients that may be trying to buy there, so they can put forward horses to me, which minimizes um, the time having to travel specifically to look at a horse when someone else can do that on my behalf. But there is a lot of travel. Just got back from America where the broodmare sale was a record turnover. Their racing's going particularly well, especially at the pointy end of the states of Kentucky, Florida, and New York. And off to England on Friday, where their market has seen tremendous growth in the yearling sales this season.
Are you, is there different sort of, obviously, Kentucky, those broodmare sales, talking to people, those American mares seem to do very well down here, but now you're going to Europe. Is there a different style of mare you're looking that maybe to bring into Australia to breed with?
It's very interesting. So if you look at Switzerland, he's out of a blame mare that was well purchased by John Frey and Arrowfield, and very different profile to the dam of Militarize at Dubowie that Jonathan Munns bought with Dean Hawthorne a few years ago. So you got two examples of Group One winning colts in the last 12 months that were the dams were specifically bought as an outcross. So we use that word a lot here, particularly with so much Danehill, but we are looking for outcrosses. You could argue that there's not enough different sire lines here. Having had such success with Danehill, when you think of More Than Ready as a broodmare sire, people are still trying to target them in America, all the way through to Sharmadale Street Cry, and Dubowie is excellent broodmare sires. So yeah, I think it's a case of Australians trying to improve the bloodlines here with different families.
It's an interesting one you talk about, like assessing mares. And I guess a lot of people sometimes just look at the suffix and go, "Oh, it's an American mare or it's a European mare," and they have a view of what those mares are. You've done a bit of trade in Japan over the years. There's probably a view about what Japanese style horses are, but the, it's probably the truth that we have a lot of great diversity within Australian and New Zealand bred horses, and it's no different in those countries, is it? Well, you're not just picking out horses on the base that they're a fast American mare. There's a lot more at play here than just the suffix at the end of the horse, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. I think it goes back to that sire power. Emirates Park, what a nice tappet mare. I think she was unraced, but out of a Group One winner. So for them as breeders to have that sire power and pedigree to go to a stallion they hold equity in, like it's a sort, is very important for their breeding operation. And, another example, they bred a Group 1 winner out of an American mare that Brian Carlson purchased. So I'm sure if you go through the statistics over the last couple of years, you would be surprised to see how many are from America America or Europe, with varying degrees of success on the track.
Well, thanks, Will, for joining us. Good to get some insight into what's going on in the world of bloodstock at the moment. Obviously, a very busy time. Best of luck over the coming weeks and months. Obviously, a bit of travel on the board, and you'll be up at the Gold Coast and then going through the sales. We've obviously got Karaka coming up in New Zealand. We've got classic sales out as well. The catalogue's out as well, and it's quite a carnival. Some might call it a circus, but certainly a carnival. The yearling sales season. You start out in January and suddenly at Easter and you're sort of shaking your head. It's quite rapid fire, isn't it? So you sort of got to be up and energetic and ready to go. It's not a place for the faint-hearted, is it? Is it, Will?
No, well, having worked for Hubie de Berg for a couple of years, we called it the Rose Roadshow. So as long as you got a glass of rosé at the end of the day of looking at horses, then everything's sweet in the world. But thank you very much for having me on this morning. And look forward to catching up for a rosé on the Gold Coast.
Excellent. Thanks very much for your time, Will.
Cheers. Thanks guys.
Tim, an issue that's cropped up this week is the senior jockeys in Victoria refusing to ride jump outs on the basis of the fact that they're unpaid. Talk us through the background here, Tim. I mean, this is an issue that it's cropped up. Obviously, they've probably waited till after the Spring Carnival to sort of bring it to the fore, the Victorian Jockeys Association. But on face value, they would seem to have a reasonable case as to why, arguing why they should be paid for effectively going out and riding on those unofficial jump outs.
That's right, Bren. It's not a new issue. They raised it since Matt Hyland's been chief executive of the VJA about 8 years ago. They've been on this issue of getting Matt and the board arguing that their members, the jockeys, should be paid for riding in jump outs at this stage. That unofficial barrier trials, as I guess we'd know them as, and they raised it again in September, but they didn't want it to become a Spring Carnival issue like it is this week. But they didn't get anywhere. They've been talking to RV quietly and the Australian Trainers Association, TROA, the Racehorse Owners Association, but they reached a point this week on Tuesday night where they went public, said, we've told our members, and they've, according to the VJA, that they will refuse to ride at the jump out starting on Monday in Cranbourne, where the main training centres, Ballarat, Cranbourne, Pakenham, Flemington as well. So if it goes ahead, I'm sure it'll cause a lot of inconvenience to the trainers trying to get their horses ready. I guess on face value, you'd say perhaps they should be paid. They're working. Why aren't they getting paid? We're all working and getting paid. But it's on the other side of the coin. The argument is that it's a cost of doing business. Jockeys are self-employed, and so part of their marketing is riding track work and and particularly the jump outs, trying to get on good horses, trying to get race rides.
Yeah, it's an interesting, isn't it? Like, it's 2024. We passed the point where people are doing stuff for free. We've seen in other industries the fact that, the concept of free work or whatever else. I guess the other aspect is, he said there's a cost to the industry of this, estimated in the realms of about $5 million, that if they were to turn all the jump outs into barrier trials, and we'll get onto that nuanced difference in a minute, that's what the cost would be from a Racing Victoria point of view. But I guess the challenge is, part of the argument seems to have been that the jockeys are still effectively compensated for this through their riding fees, Tim. Is our understanding that right, that an increase in riding fees in the past sort of 4 or 5 years was supposed to compensate for the fact that effectively they're going out and doing work and getting, doing these jump outs free per ride in terms of the jump out rides, but on their riding fees elsewhere, they were getting compensated?
Well, that's the argument made on the counter side. I think the riding fee's gone from about $211 to $265.50, which is the same as what New South Wales jockeys also get per race ride. So, and then riding in barrier trials in Victoria, which there's this racing season, there's going to be about 48 trial meetings. I guess they get $110 a ride plus superannuation. So, but then there's 17,000 of those venues we mentioned, or statewide. There's about 25,000 horses that jump out a year, I guess, provided, and 80% of that is ridden in free labour, I guess, where the other 20% of jockeys are either apprentices, so they're paid a weekly wage, so that's part of their duties, and then there's jockeys that also have private agreements with trainers or owners or whatever, and they're compensated through other means. So it's the 80% that aren't paid, but then the argument is they make it back through race rides. And again, the argument someone put to me yesterday, a well-known trainer, suggested that if jockeys that they use start getting paid for jump outs and different things, they go, well, there's no obligation to use them in races. They're going to use higher profile or so-called better jockeys, the Blake Shins, the Damien Lanes. So the big winners probably, again, are the top tier jockeys that will make more money because they'll be paid for jump outs and they'll clean up and get the best rides and more of them.
I guess the broader question around this, Tim, is do we value jockeys enough? Is the way that the system's set up in terms of encouraging particularly emerging jockeys to continue to stay in a career, which is, let's face it, extremely difficult, hazardous, one of the more dangerous professions going around in the world. Like, it is different. Like, I find the arguments that come forward about trying to compare the life of a trainer to a life of a jockey. Yes, there is risk involved in trainers' life, but nowhere near what ambulances don't follow trainers around, as they say. So, are they valued enough? And I guess, I'm not talking about the top end jockeys. We know that they do well. We know the ones that, whether James McDonald or whether you're talking about Mark Zahra or these guys, they do particularly well out of their riding. They're at the top of their game and they deserve to do well in their riding. But is there enough, I guess, focus in this industry on retaining jockeys, giving them a sustainable career? Because the other thing about a jockey career is it tends to be a short career. It's like any athlete's career. They're probably longer than some athletes because you can ride into your 30s and 40s and in some cases your 50s. But certainly there's probably a window for a lot of these guys where they can ride as jockeys. And are they getting enough compensation or enough enough recognition financially for what they're doing?
Well, again, that's a vexed question. I'm not going to give an opinion one way or the other there, but there's only so much money to go around. As you say, the top jockeys can make a lot of money. Then there's others that are battling probably in the bush and they get, 3 rides a week and they have to drive long distances to get those rides. I think Victoria does have compensation in a way where if a jockey, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but if they only get 2 rides at a meeting, they get paid for 3 and things like that to help cover their costs. So they can, and those, as even Matt Hyland used the example of a Nathan Punch, who doesn't get many race rides, but he's paid to ride track work and to ride in jump out. So, everyone wants to make more money, but there's only so much to go around, and the better jockeys, rightly or wrongly, they're the top of their profession and they earn the most. It's like footy players, NBA players, they get paid more than some of their peers.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of those agreements. There's agreements which sit around giving them a sort of a minimum, I guess, guarantee or whatever in terms of what they're trying to do, and at least they know they can guarantee it around that. And I guess the other thing too is if a jockey gets injured, Tim, and I think probably just taking different points of view on this one, there is compensation there and there's opportunities there, but they do miss out on race rides, they do miss out on prize money opportunities and those other aspects as well. So I just wonder whether, some of the comparisons between the life of a trainer and life of a jockey, they might be, in my book, they're probably a little bit erroneous, only for the fact that the risk that jockeys take is so much greater, and physically they have to be in a point where they make sacrifice in their life, whether it's diet, whether it's lifestyle, all those types of things in order to be on top of the game. Let's face it, jockeys are getting drug tested every day, or not every day, but jockeys getting drug tested a lot. There's a lot of focus on them to actually be at the top of their game. The other thing too is there's a finite pool of jockeys, Jim. So if you don't have enough jockeys, then you don't have an industry. Now, there's an argument about whether we're getting to a point where we don't have enough trainers. but that doesn't materially affect the day-to-day running of the industry the way that jockeys do. So the jockeys are I think the jockeys are in a relatively powerful position here, Tim. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think the risks the trainers take are different. Obviously, not physical risks generally, but they're financial risks. Do the owners pay? They go and buy horses on spec, often carrying $1 million plus in debt and trying to sell those horses down. And as we've discussed and written about, it's been increasingly more difficult over the last 18 months to sell down horses with the changing economy. So, it's just different risks. And the top can make a lot of money, and I guess it's for a jockey or a lower tier jockey, what's the alternative? What's their other career prospects outside racing, what they can earn? And we do see some that come back because they can, yes, they mightn't be making $500,000 and $1 million like some of the top tier ones, but they can still make comparatively reasonable money. They have to get up at 3 a.m. to do that, but that's their choice.
We'll move on now to the wagering landscape, Tim. An interesting point, like we've been waiting now for 18 months about this wagering reform, I suppose, advertising reform to land from the federal government. They've now kicked it into next year, so it's an interesting time in the broader wagering industry. And obviously, isn't there, Tim? There's a significant effect about what goes on in the wagering landscape and wagering regulation into how that affects the funding of racing.
Absolutely, especially the uncertainty, Bren, being kicked into an election year. It could become an election hot potato, I guess, particularly, I'll seek your views on this, but where if it is a hung parliament or minority government, the crossbench might have a lot more say in policies, and gambling could be one of those. Yeah,
the danger is this becomes much more highly politicized than what it has. The Albanese government's had this on their desk for 18 months. Since the you win some, you lose more report was delivered with the 31 recommendations. Obviously, 2 of those recommendations are the key part. One around the ban, comprehensive ban of gambling advertising, and one around the banning of inducements. They're the 2 aspects that have a significant effect on wagering companies, and also significant effect because of the way that the funding works through to racing. Now, there's talk about a carve out for racing, Tim, amongst all of this, and that racing will get a carve out. That's fine, but if there's a significant effect to the bottom line of wagering companies, it will affect the way that aspects are passed on to the racing industry. It'll also affect point of consumption tax turnover, which places, particularly Victoria and Queensland, are heavily reliant on now in terms of future race funding. So all this stuff will have a knock-on effect moving forward. Politically, as you mentioned and as you alluded to, the challenge is as it gets chucked into the sphere of an election campaign. The election's got to be held by May. It's probably highly likely to be held sort of April, May next year. With that in mind, unlikely we'll probably have 2 to 3 weeks of Parliament that they'll get anything through in enough time, because this is a highly contentious issue. There are votes to be had in objecting to gambling advertising. There's polls, no matter who you ask, a lot of Australians, some say a majority, support lesser gambling advertising. I think a lot of people in the industry understand that the saturation level of gambling advertising has got to a point where people have had enough and it needs to reel back. The current proposed reforms, which haven't yet been put to Parliament, are around about a scaling back to 2 per hour in certain times for TV, and a comprehensive ban on social media and digital, which specifically that second part, social media and digital, will have a significant impact on wagering companies' ability to promote themselves. So the key is here that obviously we've got the crossbench, the Greens, the crossbench with the Teal parties. You've got people like Andrew Wilkie in the lower house and Doug Bocock in the upper house, who are very engaged in this space and see a lot of advantage in talking about this issue, which is, I think, is important, don't get me wrong, but also there are votes to be had in taking a stance, and a quite strong stance on a comprehensive ban on gambling advertising. So it's what is the more likely scenario is this gets chucked right into the middle of an election campaign. People running on the fact that they will take action in this space. And as you mentioned, you may end up with a hung parliament or certainly a minority Labor government, which has to rely upon the Teals and perhaps Greens and others in order to govern. whereby they could utilise that political power, I guess, to change, to leverage more significant change in this space. So, as it's been left on the table for now, or been left off the table, sorry, for now. We move into election year. It changes the nature of how we're doing things. The other thing is just, to be, give this a bit of context, is on the other side of politics, and there is at the moment, it's priced in as a favourite option for bookmakers, that there will be a change of government. And we may have a Liberal government, opposition leader, or LNP government, opposition leader Peter Dutton has stated before that he wants to see a ban on gambling, or certainly within sports, live sports space. So this is, both sides of politics are going to be out there playing on this. There may be a case where, Teals or other members of Parliament may lend support to the Conservative side of politics in order to get them across the line on the basis that they may, push this out. So it's not a good thing for the gambling industry and wagering industry that's been pushed to, next year. And it certainly creates a sense of doubt about where, what the impact may be on racing. And then just to give that some context, wagering companies have said it could be anything up to $300 million a year to the Australian racing industry. Now, they're, of course, going to prosecute the worst possible case because they don't want to see significant reform. But even if, it's a fraction of that, a third of that, or a quarter of that, it's still a lot of money for our racing industry, which is struggling a little bit on the bottom line at the moment to find at the moment, Tim.
And should I guess in short, perhaps the PRA should be worried, but maybe if it does become the political issue that we think it will, I guess all the lobbying behind the closed doors that the industry has done over the last 18 months, not restart, but they might have to continue that, particularly once a government is elected and restart that.
I think the opportunity here is for racing bodies in particular to get front and centre on this stuff and start talking to key members within both major parties, as well as talking to the crossbench about what this would mean and the impact on the broader industry. They probably missed the boat a little bit to start with. I've been critical of this before, that they probably weren't in the room early enough to have these conversations. Certainly when the committee inquiry was held, almost 2 years ago now, I think April 2023, there weren't representatives of the racing industry here because the racing industry thought, we'll get a carve out, we'll be right. But it's naive to think that's going to be the case. I know that significant power brokers within Australian racing have been conversing around what this may look like. Some of those people also have interest in the sporting space and the fact that we could have a ban on advertising within sport and sport broadcasting will have an effect on sporting bodies' ability to charge product fees and stuff like that as well. So there's a few aspects playing around on this. I would think that while this is a difficult situation in terms of not knowing what's going on, it does give particularly the racing bodies ability to go and put in double down their efforts and say, we need to fix this up. We need to develop this and ensure that our interests, even if there is going to be a net impact on the bottom line of racing, that's been minimised as much as possible. All right, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, a comprehensive episode today. Thanks for Will Johnson to joining us earlier on, and great to talk to you, Tim. Obviously, plenty going on the racing, wagering and breeding landscape at the moment. Plenty to talk through. Today's our first anniversary of the Straight. You haven't been there quite through the entirety of the journey, but it's been a great journey to this point. And plenty more to write about, isn't there?
Absolutely, Bren. It's been a thrill the last 2.5 months or so since I've been on the team, and a great crew to work with. Hopefully we've provided plenty of interesting content and covering all the issues, certainly from my point of view, Bloodstock, and and it's only going to heat up from now, and particularly January through to June, where, as Will alluded to, it's a rosé drinking. Whether I'm not really a rosé drinker, but I might have to. Thanks, Will.
Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you listen to us through the various platforms. We're available, obviously, on a range of platforms: Apple, Spotify, Podbean, YouTube, all those places. Give us a bit of a few stars, make us feel good about ourselves, and push us up those rankings. And hopefully, we can get more and more people to listen to Straight Talk every week. And we'll see you next week.